Hello everyone and welcome to Burnt Toaster Productions. I'm your host, Burnt Toaster. Today's run isn't one of my own making. Rather, I found it on speedrun.com some time ago while I was looking for inspiration. This is all thanks to user xGarrnx, who posted an idea for a run in Fable the Lost Chapters back in 2018. Granted, they did so under the pretense of a speedrun as the site's name suggests, but I'm not a speedrun type of person, and I don't feel like trying to learn all the funky little things I'd need to do in order to make this a proper speedrun. But I do want to take a crack at this challenge, simply because it sounded interesting. Also, rather than losing my mind attempting to ensure Fable the Lost Chapters did not crash, I stuck with Anniversary. Alright, time to get into the nitty-gritty details for the rules. As xGarrnx explains, the rules are pretty simple. I'm not allowed to purchase any upgrades using experience at all. Magic is barred from use. Legendary weapons cannot be used. Bodyguards cannot be hired. Health augments are barred from use. All other augments are allowed. Only 20 health potions are allowed at a time, although this rule is hard to follow due to enemies sometimes dropping them as loot. No resurrection phials. In the case I use one, since they can also spawn as loot, I must reload from a checkpoint, just like I've died. Other than that, they're being sold. If I continue fighting after using one in a single instance, the run will be considered a failure. Food cannot be used. Elixirs are allowed to be used to upgrade health. Weapons can only go up to obsidian. Armor can go up to plate. Demon doors are allowed to be accessed. Bows can be used, but only up to ebony. And lastly, one for myself more than anything. The number of attempts is unlimited, so it's more of a test of who will crack first, me or the game. The only other thing is I'm playing on the standard difficulty setting, and that's simply because TLC didn't have a difficulty setting back in the day, so I figured why torture myself even more by playing on heroic. Plus, I want to be able to reasonably get this video out. Anyway, that's all for the rules and whatnot. I know it's a decent bit to watch flit on the screen, so I'll just add them to the description in case you wanted to try it for yourself. Now, let's get into the video, shall we? Since I'm itching to really sink my teeth into this run, I rush through the beginning section. All I need is 3 gold to buy a box of chocolates for Teresa's birthday gift, so I told that woman where her husband was, beat up a bully, and gave Rosie back to her rightful owner. When I have the money, I talk to the trader, get the chocolates, head over to my sister, and give them to her. Afterwards, my world is burning around me, and I run to where my father was. Of course, he's dead, and I get teleported to the guild by Maze and can finally begin my training. The guildmaster hands me a stick to beat a dummy with, and then sends me into the woods to play exterminator. Some time passes, and I can get my hands on a real weapon. I spar with Whisper, and like usual, pull it off flawlessly. Although, has anyone really thought about the fact that you participate in full contact sparring with a sharp weapon? Seems a touch dangerous. Oh well, it's not me losing a finger. After that, I start training with my bow, putting the smallest amount of effort into it. Due to the guildmaster moving at the pace of a geriatric snail with crippling arthritis, I decided to get graded on my melee performance. Surprising no one, I flawlessly beat Whisper a second time, which means I have a slightly better weapon. Once I'm done, I go over to the will training area and cast lightning as directed. Being done with magic until the final test, I go back to the archery range and get graded, grabbing myself a handy crossbow. A couple of years later, it's time for my final test, which simply involves me demonstrating my full power to maze, even if I'm being a bit lazy about it. I graduate, then walk over to the experience area, not buying anything. I also disable lightning since I can't use magic for this run. Don't want to accidentally use it and then fail. I then channel my inner exterminator again to take care of some oversized angry bees. Which isn't hard, the katana cuts right through them. When the queen makes her appearance, I have a little bit more work to do. Her spawn are easy to deal with, and she's pretty easy to fight. The only reason I got hit was due to her animation not being finished. Or in other words, I was careless. But after that, I sliced her up like a hibachi worker. And with that, the big bee is dead. Once I'm out of the picnic area, I grab my first silver key. These are going to be needed for a specific silver key chest that has an elixir of health inside. I'm gonna need all the advantages I can get. Afterwards, I head over to Bowerstone, talk with Maze, and then buy a leather chest piece, which isn't much protection, but I need to be as tanky as possible with this run. Since I'm here, I also grabbed the second silver key I need to open that chest. Now it's time to tackle Orchard Farm. It's not a hard quest by any stretch of the imagination. It'd be a bit harder if I decided to go into melee combat for the entire duration, but hey, I can use bows, so I'm taking the opportunity to use them. Work smarter, not harder. Regardless, the bandits don't do so well as they're just low-level enemies. Even one of the guards got a kill. With the bandits thwarted, I then have to fight Whisper since she wants to try to beat me because I'm constantly kicking her around like a frickin' ragdoll. And as expected, nothing has changed there. Once the quest is finished, I head back to the guild. There was one little thing I forgot to grab before I left. The demon door there has an elixir of health inside, so I flash my lamp and it lets me pop on in. Too bad these elixirs are quite limited, but they should be enough to see me through the game. Hopefully. Since I got my first elixir of health, I have the fun of going through Darkwood. However, rather than doing that, I chose to stop by Fisher Creek. I do need the fishing rod for a couple of elixirs of health and to nab a silver key that's in the area. All I have to do is kill some wasps, which is as easy as always. Anyway, after floundering around regarding which fishing spot held the key, I finally found it and can move on. I then make a detour to Orchard Farm. This little body of water holds one of those elixirs I need, so I take out my fishing pole and fight with the magical life-extending potion. Pressing onward, I make it to Greatwood Gorge. If you think I'm gonna let those bandits just take my hard-earned gold, you're wrong. I'm here to end them. Which goes somewhat smoothly. Groups of bandits and other human enemies with access to crossbows are a bit dangerous to fight when you have a small health pool and not so great armor. The one strategy that mostly worked was channeling my inner woodlouse and rolling around. Still, the leader gave me some problems, just not enough to end my existence right there. When I make it to the Greatwood Colossate, I clear some of the area and return to the guild to sell my resurrection phials. I can't use them after all, and they net a decent bit of gold. Back on the road again, I go through Greatwood Caves, clear out the hobs, and reach my destination of Darkwood. Now my job is to escort Dipstick 1 and 2 safely to Barrow Fields. Since I don't feel like babysitting two fully grown man-toddlers, and I don't have access to magic, I do what I normally do. Tell them to wait while I clear the next area. The Great Value branded assorted variety of bandits aren't exactly challenging to fight when you don't have to watch two guys who will do nothing but cower. While I'm in the Darkwood region, I get my fourth silver key by shooting this stone. The rest of the area is pretty easy to get through, mostly because I have access to a bow. The only slight hiccup was with fighting the Earth Troll, and even then it wasn't exactly difficult, just a bit time-consuming. When I have chopped the troll down into bite-sized pieces, the traders run off since Barrow Fields is practically right there. And now the quest is complete. Having access to Oakvale, I take the opportunity to buy some health potions and upgrade most of my gear, grabbing an obsidian longsword and a set of chainmail armor to go with it. With my nice new upgrades, it's time to go over to Twin Blades and get some info. Thanks to said upgrades, mostly the ebony crossbow, I was able to make it to the abandoned road quite easily. One shot and a bandit would fall. The abandoned road is where things get a little more testy, for the lack of a better term. Without any levels in physique, the bandits here are a little tanky, but it's nothing that a little elbow grease can't solve. It's simply the fact that the longer any one fight goes on, the higher the chance I'll end up getting slapped around like a speed bag. Regardless, I work my way through the bandits and grab all the pieces of the bandit outfit to get into the camp proper. I don the clothing and change immediately after I'm let in. Now, to get into the elite camp, I have a few choices. Rather than destroy every bandit in a 5-mile radius, I decided to take care of one bandit and yoink a pass from his corpse. In the elite camp, I have another set of choices. Once again, rather than destroying more bandits or paying an exorbitant fee to hire some assassins to do my dirty work, I decided to eliminate the guy acting as security for some hostages and free them. When that's done, I make my way to Twin Blade's tent. Of course, because I killed plenty of his men and have come in without an appointment, he wants to fight. The fight is as it usually is. It's not difficult, just a little more dangerous this time around. A hit will take a decent little chunk of my health bar. The only reason it's a bit small though is likely due to the armor. Guess it's a good thing I grabbed it when I did. The damage I'm dealing is decent though, so it's not bad overall. I just have to stay on my toes and bide my time. Anyway, I defeat him and see Teresa again. She has taken to being a bit cryptic and whatnot, but Oh well. I do have a moral choice, and I'll be honest, it's kind of a no-brainer. I mean, if I really wanted to, I could finish Twin Blade once and for all, but I have no incentive to. I can't level up at all, so why go through the effort of fighting him and the rest of the lads around us? Instead, I opt to take all of his valuables he has stored around and leave. After defeating Twin Blade in single combat, I head back to the guild and talk to Maze. Seems a friend of his may have gotten himself into trouble and Maze wants me to find him. But I wanted to get some money first. The reason being the plate set of armor. And, well, I decided to do the Traitor Massacre quest. Granted, I could have probably done any other quest, but I need that money. The quest was actually kind of tough. There are a lot of guards, and they have access to crossbows, which can mess me up. On top of that, the waves get more difficult as I cut through them. Still, it's nothing I can't handle. I did this with a stick after all. I can do it without any decent XP-based upgrades. I feel like I should have taken a couple of boasts, but I had a few close calls as it was. Sadly, I didn't have enough for the complete set, so afterwards I did the Traitor Rescue quest. I do things as I usually do for this quest. I clear most, if not all, of the area and grab the furthest traitor first, then work my way back to the entrance while getting the others. Since I have enough, I bought the rest of the armor, and I didn't realize just how strange it looks when you have nothing in physique. Those pauldrons look a little goofy, but oddly terrifying. Gets my seal of approval. My detour now finished, I can work on completing Maze's task. The thing is though, I have to deal with the rock troll. Well, I don't have to, but I wouldn't be a good sport if I just ran past it. It took a while. My sword wasn't dealing great damage, so I tried to use a crossbow, but it's a slow, chunky fella. Since I personally prefer DPS over pure damage, I just kept smacking the troll's ankles with my sword. I actually got pretty good at dodging its slam attack at the very last frame. Eventually, I defeat the big lug and can move on. All I have to do is hit these stones in order to open the demon door. Afterwards, the archaeologist has been located and he leaves. It's time to head to Notole Glade and take care of their little dog problem. Belverines aren't too difficult to deal with, thankfully, but that's mostly because my crossbow puts in enough work for now until I can slap a silver augment on my sword. The 3 or so that spawn outside the gate are practically a cakewalk. Of course, the white Balverine is a bit of a pain, and that's only due to the slightly drawn-out combo. Still not as annoying as Fable 2's Balverines, though. After successfully fighting it off twice, I get a silver augment for my sword. The actual fight with the thing is also pretty easy, but to be fair, I was blocking a decent bit and trying to wait for a good opening. Except for the times I didn't block. As I was trying to thin out the number of standard basic Balverines, I took out the white one. His lackeys didn't fare much better than him. He even got a triple kill. After I dealt with him, I returned to the Notole Glade chief, and he tells me I can now participate in the arena. Before I possibly march to my death, I make a quick little pit stop at Notole Glade to open the demon door there. I don't know if I'll be able to, but I'll at least try to open it. The reason being, there is an elixir of health in there, and looks like I was able to open it, all thanks to my crossbow. I just wanted a little bit of extra survivability in the arena, so I'm not immediately chewed up and spat out. Now, the arena isn't usually all that tough, but I have no upgrades besides the health elixirs, and by now I would normally have a good grip of the build I'm playing. But there really isn't a build this time around. It's more about simply surviving and trying to end fights as soon as possible. Still, like usual, the first 2 rounds are nothing to write home about. Wasps are extremely easy and hobs are a little less so. The 3rd round, however, I had to change things up a bit. Rather than trying to rely solely on my sword, I began using my crossbow a bit more to hasten the process of killing Balverines. The 3rd wave in particular was giving me problems. To be fair, I was getting thrown around like a small child at a water park due to the 2 white Balverines. Eventually, I get through that round of torture and have a pretty boring round afterwards. The undead aren't exactly exciting or mechanically challenging to fight. They move slowly, and as long as you keep an eye on your surroundings, you're good. After that, things get a bit more exciting once again with the bandits, and yeah, they can be a bit tough to deal with. The best strategy I have is to go after the ones with the crossbows out. They will continuously pelt you with bolts while you try fighting some other unfortunate soul in melee distance that decides to cross your path. That's not as much of a problem in the last wave, but the problem with that wave is the overall tankiness and damage they deal. Regardless, I can get through it without too many problems. Next round is the Earth Trolls, which isn't a very difficult round in all honesty. A bit annoying since I'm getting projectiles launched at me, but they're relatively weak. Just focus on one of your choosing and you'll be fine. The Rock Troll round is where things get a bit tough. Rock Trolls are pretty tanky and love throwing multiple rocks like a schoolyard bully. And bully me they did. I swear I felt like I was being bounced around like a frickin' ping pong ball. It's kind of difficult to focus solely on a single target, since if you try to, you'll have to watch the other one, and that doesn't leave very many places where you would be safe from the slime attack and projectiles. Being a part-time human ping pong ball aside, as soon as you get the first one down, the remaining one is pretty standard for a troll fight. Think of the troll as the IRS, and you'll be able to dodge those attacks without a problem. Anyway, once the trolls have been taken care of, it's time for the final round. xGarrnx isn't necessarily challenging, just incredibly tanky. Pretty easy to dodge for the most part as well. It usually charges like an angry chimpanzee about 3 times before charging up a damaging attack. That's basically the only good reliable damage window. Just keep the charge time in mind, because if you're right next to the thing, you will get hit, and it hurts quite a bit. Anyway, once the big arachnid burrows underground, you have to fight off some smaller, still incredibly large scorpions. They're nothing to worry about though, just swat them to the side. Once xGarrnx emerges, the attack pattern will be the same. So keep distance, fire the occasional arrow or bolt, and dodge. Then rack up the damage during the tail charge. After that, keep going until it's dead. Once the scorpion has been skewered like a pincushion, it's time for the real final round, which is just fighting Whisper. I mean, I did just get done killing a giant scorpion, so what threat would she be? She does have a few tricks up her sleeve, most notably a bit of magic and some explosives. Other than that, she does seem to dodge a little more often than any other time, but nothing more than a minor obstacle to tackle. After beating her, she'll yield and give you the choice to leave. However, I'm not going to do that. I need money for health potions. Sorry, Whisper. If it wasn't for that, I probably would have left you alive. Oh well, time to die. The fight continued as usual, and I put her in the ground for good. Thunder isn't very happy about it. Understandable. Also, Teresa wants to see me at the Grey House. With that in mind, I decided to make a couple of stops to buy and sell stuff and get over there to meet her. She tells me where our mother is, and that I have to find the archaeologist so he can tell me how to get into Bargate Prison. Or really just point me in the right direction. And with that, it's time to go and save him again. I went into this quest feeling somewhat confident. I was able to deal with the minions with a complication that is simply called a skill issue. They take a decent bit of damage and attack with a combo I have yet to really get down. Plus, without some level of toughness, even the more minor attacks will hurt a fair bit. And then there's the rock troll near the end, which granted acts as a stalwart barricade. But this isn't the real challenge with this quest. The real challenge is pretty much at the tail end, where I only have 5 minutes to eliminate all enemies and save the ingrate that got captured. With my damage output being less than stellar, I started worrying that I simply wouldn't be able to get through this quest. However, I did have a little help from the guards, where once they actually survived, and I didn't end their existence for a bit of XP, considering it's pretty much useless for this run. I was practically sweating during the entire fight because having a ticking timer is very stressful, especially when there's a horde of the toughest humanoid enemies to fight. But I somehow got through it with about 15 to 14 seconds left on the clock. I'll fully admit I celebrated a little. Anyway, I get the information I need and never see the archaeologist again. But before I go traipsing through the graveyard, I take a little time to buy some supplies and sell off the resurrection phials, along with other stuff I can consider junk at this point. After becoming something akin to a potion merchant, I head over to Lichfield. I immediately removed the Gravekeeper from this world and took his key. Now I have to find Nostra's tomb along with his stuff, which thankfully isn't ever difficult. Although I feel like the fishing is a tiny bit harder. I don't know if it was due to me being a bit exhausted from the previous quest, or if physique actually makes a bit of a difference with fishing. But for now, I'll have to put a pin in that and go return Nostra's things. After that, it's more of a matter of just getting through the demon door and taking out the big guy at the end of the path. Then just a bit more of fighting the undead to unlock the way to Bargate Prison, which isn't hard to deal with. Once the way there is unlocked, I take a little bit to gather some supplies or sell off extra goods I don't need. I wanted to be prepared as much as I could be for Bargate Prison. Surprising absolutely no one, the way to the prison requires fighting more of the undead. Although that's until I get into the actual prison itself, which is filled with guards. Thankfully, they're not too problematic to deal with, and most of the issues are due to their ranged capabilities. Anyway, after carving and launching bolts at the guards in my way, I find my mother in her cell and free her. Then I just have to get out of here. But Mama didn't raise no cupcakes, so I decided to fight my way through the guards. Of course, afterwards, we both get captured. And so begins the fun prison segment. If you've been around it for a bit, you know the drill. Win the race, find the code, open a book, get sent to the torture chamber. Win next race, get code, open book, get key, escape, and profit. But before doing anything, I have to grab my gear. When I'm good to go, it's time to run my sword through all these guards and get to my mother to free her. Now that she's free, I have to fight through more guards and go through the way I came in, which means fighting the Kraken. The Kraken is a moderately easy boss. The only reason moderately is in there is due to the magical beam it'll release. It's pretty difficult to avoid that one attack, and it does pretty good damage. But the rest of the fight is pretty much a free win. It's just a matter of hoping my potion stock holds up long enough to get through this fight. The only thing I really wish is that the crossbow was a bit faster. But other than that, this fight was smooth. Since we successfully escaped, Mother gives me the rundown on what we need to do, which is to find Teresa because our bloodline is required to get the key to get the Sword of Aeons. And to get to it, I'll have to find an old abbey in Hook Coast. In order to get to Hook Coast, I have to go and activate the ancient Colossate located somewhere in Darkwood. And to do that, I have to feed it souls of the dead. This was another quest I was a bit anxious about. I'm under a time limit. I have to try to kill them before the Colossate loses too much charge. In hopes of getting through it faster, I equipped my sword, which I slapped a silver augment on when I fought the White Balverine. I tried to keep the smaller guys around so the last stretch would be a bit easier to manage. However, it didn't work out that way, and all I had left were the big ones. The problem here being they're quite the tanky fellows. And as I learned with the stick run, I have to destroy them as quickly as possible. It took a decent bit, but I was able to fill the gate with the souls it hungered for. Anyway, when I'm at Hook Coast, I find the Abbey with the jello barrier blocking my path. With that as it is, I have to return back to my mother, who gets yoinked by some minions. Seems like an average Sunday to me. She yelled about a book, so I grabbed it and took it to the guildmaster. He just tells me to stand in front of the barrier as he reads aloud from the book. When the great jello wall is down, we get to deal with Maze. This was also a fight I was a bit worried about, mainly because of Inflame. Maze will cast it, and it's pretty hard to dodge once he does, and, well, it can end my existence pretty quickly. It hits pretty hard when you have no upgrades besides like 3 elixirs of health and some decent armor. He also has access to physical shield, though thankfully he doesn't keep it up for too long. Due to that and the fact that he has Inflame, I decided to attack from range when possible. His projectiles are pretty slow and easy to dodge. But it doesn't stay possible to do that for too long as he teleports into the lighthouse. Besides him almost ending me with Inflame, this little stretch was alright, nothing crazy. And the end of the fight was even less spectacular as I used the bow to put him down. After defeating Maze, I have to tackle the bigger problem, Jack. Since I didn't want to be underprepared or break a rule, I decided to buy and sell whatever I could at the moment, mostly potions and the like. When preparations are complete, it's time to chase Jack across the Albion. I didn't really get into any fights as I wanted to save as many potions as possible. The only thing I really fought were the Screamers. They're more of an annoyance than an actual threat, but since they can't attack from a ranged position, I decided to take them down. Back to the actual matter at hand, nothing really matters because Jack is constantly beating me to the punch before finally making his way to the guild and singeing it a little. Well, he has my mother and my sister in the Chamber of Fate where I must do battle with him. Of course, Scarlet Robe's oxygen cable is cut, and that means it's time for this fight to begin. Before I can really do anything about Jack, I must take care of his minions first. It's a little rough to say the least. Normally I'd have some sort of AoE capabilities or just be able to squish them with pure strength. Since I have none of those, I was getting skill checked pretty hard here. Regardless, the minions fall one by one, and then it's just Jack and I. The melee portion of the fight is not great. I'm not dealing fantastic damage, and he has access to magic which can and will interrupt my flourishes. And his standard melee attack will do the same, meaning I have to time them properly in order to deal any damage to him. It also doesn't help that he'll use Assassin's Rush to get away from me after 3 strikes. It takes a bit, but eventually I get into a second phase. His second phase is not exactly difficult, but if I'm caught unawares, it's not going to be pretty. Since I know what this phase entails, I preemptively equipped my longbow. The only reason being DPS over pure damage. Crossbow was just a bit too clunky and slow for something like this, especially since I'd still have to charge the shot and wait for the long reload animation. The biggest worry is when the minions spawn in. Jack also has this little light burst ability that shreds your health. Combine it with the minions closing in and you'll find that you're going to be stuck between a rock and a hard place. I technically avoided death by being quick enough with the potions, but that attack did eat through a nice bit of my stock, more than I really wanted it to. Somehow though, by the skin of my teeth, I managed to survive and defeat him before he could let out another one of those light attacks. As for the choice I made regarding the sword, well, since legendaries are not usable, I'd toss it away. I'd have to use it in order to keep it, so say goodbye to the sword, everyone. Since I decided to add more work on myself and I wasn't so satisfied with everything going relatively smoothly, I went ahead and tackled the expansion. The first task is to grab the fire heart. In order to do so, I have to complete the puzzles that await behind the demon door right outside the guild. And things went rather swimmingly this time. Then again, I prepared for it. Anyway, after helping the prophets, I get to go back to Hook Coast and insert the gem into the lighthouse, so I can call a ship and sail to the northern wastes. Except there was a small roadblock in my way. The summoners. They're pretty tanky and have a fairly powerful ranged attack and deal decent melee damage. But once again, the lessons I've learned from the stick run have provided an answer for this conundrum. Flourishes. Rather than attack, they continuously try to back away and avoid damage. Flourishes are particularly useful against the two that have some support, as the minions will not approach to attack either. The summoners are really the only threat here. They'll attack the Fireheart as it charges, which means I've got a little stress mechanic to deal with. But honestly, as long as I defeat the first summoner moderately fast, I'm pretty much golden. When the last summoner falls, the minions explode and my ride arrives. In a small form of preparation for the ice troll that I'll have to face, I bought a cleaver and shoved 2 flame augments on it. I figured since Fireball works so well on it in the will only run, this will do some decent damage. Honestly, it was a waste of money and time because I found out my katana dealt a bit more damage, but that might be due to the piercing augment. I don't really know. Regardless, the ice troll is simply a nuisance as usual, and falls after a fairly drawn-out battle. Remember those Elixirs of Life? Yeah, there are 2 more in the Northern Wastes that I can use to increase my health just a bit further. Since I want to make sure I was as prepared as possible for the upcoming quests, I grabbed one of them. I think I grabbed the other one, but I didn't record it for some reason. After that, I run past some enemies and make it to Snowspire. The next task is finding the glyphs of inquiry, but before I do that, I decided to grab the Holy Warrior helmet and the Bright Plate set. Aesthetically speaking, it's a good combination and provides just a tiny bit more armor. Not enough to make a noticeable difference, but hey, at least I look cool. After acquiring my final set of armor, I search for those glyphs. It's not hard as there are only 3 that need to be found, and the enemies here don't put up enough of a fight to be noteworthy. Well, maybe besides the ice troll before the last glyph, but that's just because they're invulnerable for a period of time. The last glyph, however, requires me to fight off 2 summoners and 2 minions at once. It was a bit tough. Most of that can be attributed to the summoners having their ranged attacks. I have to be a bit careful since it's highly damaging, but as long as I flourish, I should be fine. The other won't do anything while I'm bonking his friend with my weapon. When the summoners are dealt with, I just have the minions and there are only 2 of them. They can prove to be a bit difficult, but that's all due to me having trouble reading their animations for some reason or another. I don't know what my brain is doing half the time. Nevertheless, I defeat them and can grab the last glyph. I then return to Scythe to learn what I need to do to stop Jack, which involves using Jack's mask to transport 3 souls to the Archon Shrine. The first of which is the soul of a king of the arena. In what seems to be tradition on this channel at this point, I took Thunder Soul. It's definitely not because the other option is a bit more dangerous and I don't want to look like a fool or anything. That'd be crazy. But in all seriousness, it's simply quicker and I'm behind enough as is. The fight isn't difficult in the slightest, flourishes are the only way to reliably damage him, and his special lightning ability is easy to stop with an arrow. That is until around the end of the fight where he doesn't seem to block at all. Looks like I've got my first soul. Time for the second one, which is the soul of a heroine. Rather than fight Briar Rose, who's rather annoying without something like Inflame or any other spell that can damage multiple enemies, I chose to grab my mother's soul. The thing is, though, I have to eradicate the Screamers in the graveyard, and there are a lot of them. I don't know if you know this, but that many enemies being capable of damaging me at once is not healthy. I felt like I looked away from my health bar for a few moments, and just like a small child in a horror movie, it disappeared. Which means this is my first actual death of the run. The second attempt went a lot better. I figured my best bet was to remain mobile and try to strike at groups of them, and prioritize the ones with the magical flaming circle underneath them. After fighting like a madman screaming about circles, I can finally collect my mother's soul and return to the shrine for the last inscription. The oldest soul. I actually had a hard time choosing whose soul I wanted to take. I ultimately decided on Nostro since the fight has no ranged combatants. The issue was actually dealing damage to Nostro, because he can't be harmed until some of his soldiers are filled. It was mostly just a bit tedious since the damage window is kind of short and I don't deal fantastic damage. After what felt like an eternity, even though it was only about 7 minutes, I finally defeated Nostro in combat and collected his soul. Now that all of the souls have been collected and slapped into the shrine, I can face Jack for the final time. Here we are, the final battle. Time to end this. As you can imagine, Jack in dragon form when you lack health and toughness is actually quite a threat. The first attempt saw me attacking him until he flew away, and then promptly ended with me getting roasted like a duck. During the second attempt, I almost died after I mistimed a dodge. Thankfully, I was getting pretty good at healing before the game considered me no longer in the land of the living. This time around, I played it a bit safer and quickly learned how to abuse Jack's AI. You see, depending on where you are in the area, he'll choose one of like roughly 3 attack patterns when he flies off. To deal the most damage to him at a time, I stayed somewhat close to the rubble in front of the platforms. This would cause him to sit at one of the sides and attempt to burn me. A bit like the first time he tried to deep fry a turkey. Anyway, I just have to do that and keep an eye on my surroundings, as at some point some friends will join in on the fun. The best part about the dragon fight is the fact that Jack can hit his lackeys, and he deals pretty good damage, which means it's less time I have to spend trying to fight them off. Still, they are annoying because of the whole limited health potion stipulation. Speaking of which, once I whittled them down enough for the summoners to start spawning in, I ran out of health potions. A summoner threw its little lightning ball, and I was shockingly not breathing anymore. I ended up using a resurrection phial, so I had to restart from the last checkpoint, which is at the beginning of the fight. Well, time to do it all over again and try to stop myself from gnawing on a brick out of anger. On the third attempt, I switched out my crossbow for my longbow. It was simply easier to deal with. It deals less damage, but since knocking an arrow is faster than loading a bolt, I was able to deal some decent damage. However, all good things must come to an end, as I got seared and used a resurrection phial that was dropped as loot. Probably from a minion. With the fourth attempt, I was a little more conservative with my health potions and got Jack's health pretty low. In an effort to bait him to damage or kill a summoner that spawned, I stayed in the back. As one would expect, I somehow got caught in his strafing run, which killed me. The fifth attempt was pretty smooth overall. I really started to memorize his attack patterns and kind of learned when I shouldn't focus on fighting the little guys or when I shouldn't attack Jack. Still, I abused Jack's AI as much as I could. I can't exactly stand toe-to-toe against him, otherwise I'll be all sorts of cooked or maimed. After being patient and disciplined with my potion usage, I had the perfect opportunity to rush Jack down and finish this fight. I was so damn happy when I saw that cutscene. This fight took me about an hour in total for me to get through. Anyway, since I was forced to forsake the sword, I threw the mask into the lava, destroying it and completing the run. This run was actually a bit of a pleasant challenge. I'm genuinely surprised I somehow managed to get through most of the game without perishing. Regardless, it was quite fun and a nice experience after not being able to do anything for a bit over a month. I guess this really showcases how important it is to keep trying if you fail at something. All it takes is a bit of repetition, learning, and the willingness to continue. So don't lose sight of your goals and keep on going. Before I end the video, I wish to thank user xGarrnx for posting the idea over on speedrun.com. Without them posting the idea, I wouldn't have thought about doing a run like this. Anyway, thank you all for watching. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe, especially if you want to see more content like this in the future. Also, consider hitting that little notification bell so you at least have a higher chance of seeing videos when they release. This has been Burnt Toaster from Burnt Toaster Productions, and I shall see you all next time. Bye for now.